has a number of problems that he has to solve, and he doesn't, as far as we know, have a way to solve them. And he doesn't have. It's not clear to me that he has a plan to stop the war in Ukraine, for example.
Well, as I said earlier, last night, America voted with Russia at a United Nations meeting. They opposed a European-drafted resolution condemning Moscow's actions and supporting Ukraine's territorial integrity. I mentioned in my introduction also that we'd always assumed that Russia and America were on different sides, but now is there a new alliance, and what does it mean for the rest of the world? Let's speak to someone I've always thought of as a big expert on this, Anne Applebaum, staff writer at The Atlantic, author of many books, including recently Twilight of Democracy, The Seductive Lure of Authoritarianism, and also Autocracy Inc. So, Anne, welcome to the programme.
Thanks for having me.
So, let's just deal with that issue up front at the beginning. Are we talking about a realignment in which the United States is closer to Putin than to Europe, or is that a hysterical overstatement?
I think it's too early to talk about the U.S. being aligned with Russia, but I don't think it's too early to talk about a fundamental reshaping of American foreign policy and an abandonment or turning away from, or I'm not sure what the right metaphor is here, rejection of, loosening of the 80-year-old idea that the U.S. operates through and together with allies, that the U.S. is the leading democracy, the leader of other democracies, that it works with democracies both internally and around the world, and that its power is related to its ability to keep and hold values-based allies, and to operate through the institutions that those alliances have created, whether it's NATO or whether it's or whether other trading and other organizations. I think this is a maybe the most important. It's even more important than what America does with Russia. It's very important that everybody understand in the UK, in Europe, in Asia, that Donald Trump is somebody who has his whole career, since the 1980s, has been talking about how what a waste of money allies are, what a drag they are, how they bring America down. In his first term, he was prevented from acting on that deep belief, wherever it comes from. He is acting on it now. And that, I think, is not hysterical and needs to be taken seriously.
So just to press on that, when I say very similar things to people, they say, well, you're concentrating on what Donald Trump is saying. This is Boris Johnson's argument. You're just concentrating on what he's saying, and Boris being an expert on this, there's a difference between what you say and what you actually do. And Trump isn't going to do this. He's simply saying these things in order to gain leverage. The European Union will put more money into defence. You've just seen Keir Starmer do this. Ukraine will be a bit more reasonable in dealing with Russia, but will bring Russia to the table. This isn't really a profound change in the United States' actual stance. It's just a rhetoric.
I think they're now beginning to do things that are not just rhetoric. It's true they haven't done anything, unchangeable yet. But when the Secretary of Defense is talking about withdrawing troops from Europe, when the Vice President goes to a European security conference and refuses even to speak about your security, and instead accuses Europe of being somehow undemocratic, and this is coming from a leading member of the political movement that brought us January the 6th in the United States. When you have a vote at the UN where the United States votes with Russia and Belarus and Nicaragua and the Central African Republic against Europe and the Asian democracies, then you're beginning to be in a different world. This isn't just the president mouthing off or saying the kind of stuff he usually says. They're beginning to put, real moves on the table that will be harder to change. We haven't had, when we do see, or if we did see troop withdrawals, if we did see some kind of ugly surrender imposed on Ukraine, then we would, then we're at a point of no return. And it's true, Boris is right. We're not at that point yet. But this is going a little bit farther now than just talk.
So this country's sort of wavering over how best to deal with Trump. It's very tricky, and Keir Starmer's finding that tricky. He's going to meet him on Thursday. What lessons can he learn from the people who've met him so far, including Emmanuel Macron, about how to deal with him? So how does he get the balance between sticking up for the things that this country thinks are important, trying to preserve some kind of alliance with the United States where our interests converge, and at the same time making sure that he doesn't offend Donald Trump in such a way as to add to the trouble?
So Keir Starmer is very good at presenting concrete facts and plans, and he's always seems to be better at that than he is at big ideas, and that's actually going to serve him well. If he goes to Washington and says, here's my plan for Ukraine, right? Or here's my plan for European security, or here's my plan for, the US, American, American, British, European, trade negotiations, that's going to be more useful than any kind of grandstanding one direction or another. Like, it doesn't really help to flatter Trump or to suck up to him because he doesn't respect that. It's not going to help the British Prime Minister to shout at Trump either. None of that kind of public grandstanding serves any purpose. It doesn't get you anywhere. The best thing he can do is, Trump has a number of problems that he has to solve, and he doesn't, as far as we know, have a way to solve them. And it's not clear to me that he has a plan to stop the war in Ukraine, for example. And if Starmer can give him the bones of a plan or tell him what will work and what doesn't, I think that would be the most useful thing he could do.
Well, Anne Applebaum, staff writer at The Atlantic, author of a number of excellent books, all of which I recommend, and one of them is The Twilight of Democracy, The Seductive Law of Authoritarianism. Thank you so much, Anne.
It's fine.
President Trump, do you have a message for Pope Francis, sir, who's still in the hospital? Do you have a message for Pope Francis, sir?
Well, thank you very much. We very much appreciate the attention. Today's a big day in that we had a G7, and President Macron is a very special man in my book. We were together, we did it together, and I think a lot of progress has been made. We've had some very good talks with Russia. We've had some very good talks with others, and we're trying to get the war ended with Russia and Ukraine, and I think we've come a long way in a short period of weeks.
President, thank you. I want to thank Mr. President for his hospitality. We had a good discussion this morning for the G7 here, and for the third year of this war in Ukraine, and I think our common objective clearly is to build peace, and a solid and long-standing peace.
Europe is loaning the money to Ukraine. They get their money back.
No, in fact, to be frank, we paid 60% of the total effort, and it was through, like the US, loans, guarantee, grants, and we provided real money, to be clear. We have 230 billion frozen assets in Europe, Russian assets, but this is not as a collateral of a loan, because this is not our belonging. So they are frozen. If at the end of the day, in the negotiation we will have with Russia, they're ready to give it to us, super. It will be loan at the end of the day, and Russia would have paid for that.
If you believe that, it's okay with me.
This week, we've shared this information with other European countries, and we are ready and willing to provide those security guarantees. President Trump, as he said, will be meeting with President.
C'est un moment important de la discussion. On veut bâtir la paix en Ukraine, et le bilan qui a été rappelé, une réalité, il y a d'1 million de morts et de blessés. depuis le début de ce conflit et de cette guerre d'agression. Notre volonté, c'est que cette paix dure, parce que nous avons déjà eu un cessez-le-feu et une paix qui n'a pas été respectée. C'était les accords de Minsk, 1 puis 2. Et donc le corps de cette discussion, c'est de s'assurer d'abord qu'il y ait un cessez-le-feu, ensuite que les Ukrainiens soient impliqués. Et je pense que ce que vient de dire à l'instant le président Trump est très important, c'est-à-dire qu'il va rencontrer rapidement le président Zelensky pour signer cet accord sur les minerais critiques et les terres rares, et que c'est aussi un moyen d'avoir une implication américaine forte. Les Européens sont prêts à prendre leur charge sous des formes diverses de soutien à l'armée ukrainienne, de présence y compris pour s'assurer que la paix soit durable. Et l'implication dans la durée des États-Unis d'Amérique à travers cet accord est une bonne chose. Et donc tout est encore à construire. Et je ne veux pas préempter les discussions. Mais nous partageons le même objectif. Et ce qu'on a discuté ce matin, pendant 1 heure après la visioconférence ensemble, est-ce qu'on va continuer de travailler, et sont pour moi des bonnes avancées.
I have no idea what he's saying, but that is
You will translate.
elegant, beautiful language. Go ahead, please. So we're at the Eiffel Tower having dinner with your wonderful wife and with my wonderful wife, and we came out and he started speaking the French deal. And we didn't have an interpreter, and he was going on and on and on, and I was just nodding, yes, yes, yes. And he really sold me out, because I got back the next day and I read the papers. I said, that's not what we said. He's a smart customer, I will tell you that. Sure. Exactly what we agreed. I mean, not soon, but I would be certainly, if this all gets settled out, which I think it will, sure, I would go there.
On the 9th of
And
May?
he'd come here too.
On the 9th of May on the Red Square?
I don't know the 9th of May, no, I think that's pretty soon. But no, at the appropriate time I would go to Moscow.
When do you see the war will end?
I think the war could end soon.
How soon?
Within weeks.
Weeks?
Today on the major economic development transactions between the U.S. and Russia.
That the peace is respected. Our assistance may include other capacity building, perhaps for the military.
Yeah, he will accept that.
He will accept
I've
it.
asked him that question.
You talk to me?
I've asked him that question.
Russia is usually the one that pays everybody back. Are they the aggressor?
It's just frozen assets now. You can take the proceeds of the frozen assets, but you cannot take the assets themselves, because it's not respecting international law, and we want to respect international
How is
law.
one different than the other? If you can take the proceeds from it, how can you not take
Because it's
them?
very different. You keep the assets, you take the proceeds because they are paralyzed in a certain way, you take the proceeds during the wartime, but you keep the assets, and it's part of the negotiation at the end of the war. Because, I mean, this war costed all of us a lot of money. And this is the responsibility of Russia, because the aggressor is Russia.
Should the US be
So,
compensated?
so at the end of the day, this frozen asset should be part of the negotiation. All in all.
Like the Europeans, I believe that taxpayers in the United States also. Our focus is on achieving a ceasefire as soon as possible and ultimately a permanent peace. My meeting with President Macron today was another important step forward in that sphere, because he's been very much involved right from the beginning in trying to get it over with, and we're going to get it done. I believe that Emmanuel agrees with me on many of the most important issues. Chief among them is this is the right time. It may be the only time, you know. Invite Emmanuel to say a few words.
I think it's good to have discussion. I think it's useful to have negotiation. I think it's super important to go to the peace. But my strong point was to say, let's try to get something first which can be assessed, checked and verified. And let's be sure that we build sufficient guarantees in the short run. And this is where we are ready to be engaged. As for France, a lot of my European colleagues are ready to be engaged. But we do need this American backup, because this is part of the credibility of the security guarantees. And this is our collective deterrence capacity. Nous voulons la paix. Cette paix ne peut pas signifier la capitulation de l'Ukraine. Cette paix ne peut pas être un cessez-le-feu sans garantie. Cette paix doit prévoir les conditions d'une souveraineté ukrainienne, permettre à l'Ukraine de négocier avec les parties prenantes toutes les questions qui la touchent et pour laquelle elle est seule légitime à négocier. Et c'est une paix dans laquelle nous devons prendre nos responsabilités pour maintenir dans la durée sécurité et stabilité pour l'Ukraine et pour toute la région. Et pour nous, Européens, c'est une question existentielle.
conversation go with President Trump? How did your conversation go with President Trump?
Oh, Chris Jones is here.
how are you?
Oh, no, could we do them all again? Do other programs? Also, look,